And I know this is ridiculous, but it is what it is. So, as I was saying, the my new home is at Hopium Chronicles, and this deck you're about to see, it was originally built in 2017 as a response to Trump and to his American Carnage speech. And it was built, and its original name was Patriotism and Optimism, and rejecting Trump's poisonous pessimism. And so from day one, this was about telling a more positive story about America and about the Democratic Party than was commonly being told in the national media, and particularly by MAGA and Trump. Our story today really begins in 1989, when the Cold War ended and a new age of globalization began. And we're going to look at our politics through that lens, that there was this enormous change that took place in America and around the world. And the world has gone through these tumultuous changes since 1989. And we are so different today than we were. And these are just some of the things that we now have to add AI to this, generative AI, to this list of things that are transforming the world, that have transformed the world for those of us who were alive prior to 1989. And what the premise of this deck is, in this presentation, is how can we look at American politics through the lens of how the two parties managed against all of this change that's taking place. All of you who've run organizations know that managing against change is one of the great attributes of a good leader. And let's look at how the two parties themselves have managed against change. So first is on the most basic measure, which is job creation. You can see that Democrats have done a far better job since this new age of globalization began in 1989. Trump even had negative job growth, the first one to have lost jobs on their watch since Herbert Hoover, long time ago. And you can see when you add these numbers up is that, under the 16 years of the Bushes and Trumps, Republicans had net 2 million jobs created. The 16 years of Clinton and Obama, there were 34 million jobs created. So when I used to do this presentation, it was at the very beginning of the Trump era. The Republican number went down, the Democratic number was 33.8, but now we have the Biden period where we've seen more jobs created in his first year in office than any year in American history. And so this becomes now something that's really dramatic. We've had 18 years of Democratic presidents, 16 years of Republican presidents, and Biden has seen 6 times as many jobs created in his first 2 years as was created under the 16 years of the 3 Republican presidents. And just to put it in a different way to cut the data, which is job creation per month, is you can see that Biden has outpaced the Republicans by 50 to 1 to this period. It's kind of incredible. And that the Republicans only saw 10,000 jobs created per month over 16 years on average. Just to put it in perspective, 236,000 jobs were created last month, which would be the equivalent of 2 entire years of job growth of Republicans just in 1 month. Right? So their performance was anemic, to be generous, perhaps. The unemployment rate, and however you cut this data, we're going to see very similar things. The unemployment rate went up under Republicans. It's gone down under Democrats during this period. And when you add up all the jobs, there have been 48 million jobs created since 1989. 46 million of those jobs have taken place, have happened under Democratic presidents, 96%. I mean, this is an awful lot to nothing. And, this, to me, this slide is sort of the core of this deck, that we've demonstrated repeatedly that we can create growth and rising wages and lower deficits. And they've shown repeatedly that they create recession, spiraling deficits, American decline. We need to establish this fundamental contrast about the lives lived during this period and how the two parties have performed. There's an urgency to this. GDP growth tells a similar story. We've seen much stronger growth under Democrats than Republicans. Obama's numbers were obviously, brought down significantly by him inheriting the recession in the first year of the Great Recession. But, even this comparison with Trump, the Biden GDP growth has been 3 times what it was under Trump. Wealth creation. This is an area of enormous importance. We are much wealthier today than we were in 1989 as a society. The Economist actually has a piece that just came out today about the strong economic performance of the American economy. But we've seen the stock market go up, and this slide is from last month. We didn't update it, but it's still very similar. The data is still very similar. We've seen the stock market the Dow go from 2000 in 1989 all the way up now to 33,000, where it is today. A huge increase in the collective wealth of the United States. And most of this boom that's taken place has happened under Democratic presidents. We've seen enormous wealth creation when we've been in power, far less so when they've been in power. We'll see how Biden does. We've got to give him a little bit more time on this one. And I think this is another sign of, if you want a political party that creates jobs, creates wealth, creates opportunity, there's one party that's done that. And if you want a party that creates recessions and spiraling deficits, there's another party that you can go to if that's what you choose, right? And on incomes, this is one cut on the data on this. I mean, one of the things you often hear from people is that, people have fallen behind, or wages and incomes have been flat, for 20 years or 30 years. That's not true. I mean, people are better off today. Everybody's better off today than they were in 1989. For families who are making maybe $10,000 more, that's not like the gains we've seen in the stock market. But the notion that there's somehow been some kind of great stagnation or even people falling backwards, as Trump called it, American carnage, it's not there in the data. It's just not there in the data. I mean, we want things to be better than they are. We want to see more progress, but certainly this idea that somehow things have gone south for the United States is not true in any of this data that you're going to see today. And, for Democrats, certainly, we are much more focused not on just the overall wealth that's been created, but the distribution of that wealth, right? And as you can see, again, it's not been a flat line. We've seen, people, this is median income, right, gone up under Democrats, went way up under Obama after that initial dip in the Great Recession. Trump did pretty well, right? We have to add I now realize we don't have the Biden numbers, but you can see that this was not a flat line. Families are making more money today in real terms than they were, but it's just not enough. It hasn't kept up with the pace that we've seen for people who have asset wealth in their homes and in the stock market. And the same is true also with earnings, weekly earnings, that things have gone up under Democrats and not so much under Republicans. On fiscal issues, which we're going to be right in the middle of in the next couple months with the Republican terrorism on the debt ceiling, Democrats have been far better in managing the fiscal side of the House than the Republicans. All 3 Republican presidents saw the annual deficit go up. All 3 Democratic presidents have seen it go way down. It's not even a close call on this one. And Trump's performance, his fiscal performance and the deficits that he created were among the worst in American history. I mean, his overall economic performance as president certainly ranks among the worst in American history. And the 3 Republican performances over this time are collectively some of the worst economic performances by a political party in all of American history. Here's the debt as a percentage of GDP during the war. And you can see that after the war, it stayed in kind of a reasonable place. I mean, it dropped, after Reagan cut taxes, right? We saw the deficit go way up. But this is Trump, right? Here he is all by himself, the profligate guy spending his inheritance that he didn't earn. Here it is. I mean, among the worst in history. So the Republicans' arguments about this, all of a sudden, this concern about the deficit is just a little bit hard to take. The deficit, as everyone probably knows, it went up every year under Trump and it's come down every year under Biden. And on the debt ceiling has been raised far more under recent Republican presidents than Democratic presidents. And so, again, these fundamental arguments the Republicans are making are just a little bit hard to take if you actually know the data. And what's so interesting is if you really listen to them talk, right, their basic story is, hey, we shouldn't be spending this money in Ukraine. We should be spending it here at home. And then Democrats can say, hey, we just passed the biggest public investment programs in 50, 60 years, right? isn't that what you want? And then their argument back is, of course, no, we need to cut them all. So, I mean, there's no logic or reason to what they're arguing, and it is a little bit hard to take. Let's spend a minute talking about how much better things are today. And again, I apologize for the technical problems today. So, first off, our recovery from COVID has been better than any other major economy in the world. This is actually something that's the subject of this New Economist article, which I haven't read yet, but we've outperformed every other major economy in the recovery from COVID. We also today have the lowest peacetime unemployment rate since World War II, the lowest unemployment rate in 54 years. Kind of a remarkable thing, given that there are people arguing the economy is not doing very well. And we also know that we have the lowest, during Biden's presidency, we've had both the lowest uninsured rate and the lowest poverty rate ever recorded in American history. I mean, so we've had the lowest peacetime unemployment rate since World War II. We've had the lowest uninsured, lowest poverty rates in American history under Joe Biden. New business formations, which is an incredible sign of the health and vitality of the American economy, have been staying at very elevated levels. This is obviously very important for the future growth of the country and happiness of workers. Frankly, more people are doing their own thing than before. It's great to see. And, you know, even though inflation's been too high, no question, wages have also been very high. And this is why the impact of inflation was, I think, exaggerated by Republicans during the last election, which is why it didn't perform for them the way that they wanted. They believed they were going to win the election because of high inflation. But if inflation's up 7% and you're making 6% more, then the net impact of inflation is only 1%, right? And not 7%. And so there's been far too little discussion about how the fact that people are making more money today and everybody's making more money. And when inflation comes down, they're still going to be making more than they were making before. And so it's one of the reasons why kind of the doom and gloom from the Republicans in this last election, the economy didn't work the way that they had hoped. We also know that due to government programs and investments and also because of the squeeze in the workforce, that people at the bottom 50% have more money in the bank recently than they've had in a long time. And this is, we've seen enormous wage gains for people at the very bottom of the economy. It's really encouraging. And we also know that we have more job openings today, basically, than any time in American history. There's almost 2 jobs that are open today for every 1 person who's unemployed. It's incredible to think about that. And it's why we need more workers. We don't need more child labor. And the trade deficit, something the Republicans care about a lot, or at least Trump did, has come way down in recent months, which is obviously very encouraging. And on something that is still very front and center to our discourse in the United States is crime. There's no question that during COVID, crime bumped up a little bit in some places. There was a sense of social unrest that was, everything was dislocated. It was an enormous shock to our system. It's not surprising that crime bumped up a little bit, but crime rates today are a fraction of what they were back 30 years ago. And the progress that we've made on crime, this notion that the Republicans are pushing, that somehow the country is becoming dangerous, you can't even go to New York, right? All this stuff, it's absurd. And we have to do a far better job at challenging it, particularly because we know that the murder rate in red states is much higher than in blue states. And we know that, they use New York all the time. All the crime statistics in New York are far lower than many Republican cities, including Jacksonville, Florida, where, the largest city in Florida. And we have to be far more forceful in our engagement on this and not let them to continue to define this issue the way that they do. We also know in another area where they engage with us very directly is on, their argument that Joe Biden has somehow destroyed domestic energy production. We're not only producing far more renewables than we were a few years ago, but even in domestic oil and gas production, right, is way up. And this year in 2023, we're going to see the most domestic oil produced in America than any year in our history. And so if Joe Biden was setting out to destroy the oil and gas industry, he's done a pretty terrible job at it, particularly when you think about all the profits that they made last year. I mean, the discourse around energy coming from the Republicans is among the most ridiculous things in a party that's become pretty ridiculous on most major matters. some of their rhetoric on this is among the most ridiculous things that come out of their mouth. We also know that this big argument that they make that Democrats are for open borders, during the Obama-Biden administration, the number of undocumented immigrants in the United States actually dropped. And we were not for open borders, right? We actually were able to make sure that we didn't see an increase in the undocumented population. The challenges we're having now are very unique to this time of COVID and climate disasters that have happened in surrounding countries. There's a lot of challenges ahead of us. We are in a period where we could be seeing heightened attempts to come into the country for a very long time. And we need a much better strategy than we have today. The current immigration system was built for a different time. It never anticipated 1 million people showing up at the border and turning themselves in to be given court cases in the United States. And we're going to have work to do on this, because it can't be that anyone can show up at our border from anywhere in the world and expect to get a court case. It would become an enormous draw. And certainly Biden is doing his best in managing a difficult situation that he inherited from Donald Trump, frankly. And so how are we doing, America, right? Lowest peacetime unemployment rate since World War II, lowest poverty uninsured rates ever. The stock market is way up from 1989. We had the best economic recovery in the G7. The historic Biden investments that we've made across the board are going to propel growth, prosperity for decades. We're taking control of our energy destiny through both domestic production and the acceleration of decarbonization and renewables. 2 job openings per unemployed persons, wages and new business formation, elevated levels, real earnings were up in 2022. I'm reading this because I want people to understand how remarkable the American economy is today and how much progress we've made as a country, right? The trade deficit's down, the budget deficit is way down, crime rates are way below what they were, immigrant crime rates are way below native-born Americans, the teenage pregnancy rates are way down, high school graduation rates, I should say high school, are at an all-time high, college attainment rates by immigrants are now matching native-born. In so many measures, we are so much better off today than we were. And we have to take control of this dialogue in the United States. The Republicans talk down America. We need to talk it up. By showing that we can make progress, we're also reinforcing the notion that we can govern ourselves and that we're not, being pushed around by global events. There's so much, this matters so much, that we help tell a better story about the remarkable progress America's made in recent years. And what's critical is that all that progress that we've made has happened during a period of extraordinary levels of immigration. And so rather than immigrants having made things worse in America, they've contributed to making it perhaps as good a time to be alive in the United States as any time in our history. And this is very important for the Democratic Party to lean into the success of the vast wave of immigration that we've had. Because the fundamental argument that Republicans make that immigrants have made this country worse is false and wrong, and we should be fighting it at every step. And people, in recent years have gotten much more favorable to immigration. There's a ton of polling on this. There hasn't been some huge spike in anti-immigrant fervor. In fact, it's the exact opposite. And even in 2016, when Trump won, there was a question in the exit polls, which is, should the undocumented immigrants in the United States go or stay? And only 25% said go, 70% said stay. And so the anti-immigrant politics the Republicans are pursuing is a minority politics. It's not where the country is, not where a majority of the country is. And neither is their position on trade and globalization. The Democratic Party is much more favorable to open societies and trading with other countries than the nativistic, now and protectionist Republican Party. This would cause Ronald Reagan to be turning over in his grave, certainly. So by many measures, life in America today is better than it's been perhaps in a long time, or perhaps ever, frankly. And I think we've got to do a better job at making that case. The Democratic success, I apologize again for the technical issues, the Democratic success in this age has not just been in governing, but it's been in politics too. We've seen in this age of globalization that since 1992, Democrats have won more votes in 7 out of 8 national elections. No American political party's ever done that before. This is the best popular vote run of an American party in American history. And you can see that Bush, the Republicans have only broken 50% once in this entire period. And so the idea that they have 2/3 of the Supreme Court, given that we have repeatedly won many more votes than them over a long period of time, it's one of the sort of true political outrages of this era. What's also important to recognize is the success that we had in 2022. Many of you have heard me talk about this, that in a year that was supposed to be a red wave and a wipeout for the Democrats, we actually gained ground in these critical battleground states. We picked up a Senate seat, state House seats, 3 governorships, kept the House close, which is important for the next election. We did better in the early vote than we did in the last 2 elections. We're learning how to lean into the early vote as a national party, and our voters are being conditioned to vote early. Our candidates dramatically outraised the Republicans. And the last 2 elections, we saw the best performance of the Democratic Party in this critical battleground of the Southwest in 80 years, right? There is so much that's going right for us right now. And you can see this is party identification during this period. And you can see the country's more democratic, right? You saw that in the vote. It's also in the identification. The 2 parties are not the same. They're not seen as being mirror images of one another, where there's more Democrats than Republicans in the United States. And so if I'm right, and that people in this country since 1989 have experienced basically good Democratic presidents and not so good Republican presidents, then you should see that show up in the vote preference of people who came of political age since 1989, people in their mid to late 40s and younger. And you do find that. And this is really important. And this is very critical to my work around Get to 55, which we can talk about in the Q&A, that we've seen now a structural shift in America where younger people now are overwhelmingly Democratic after being a jump ball part of the electorate in the Clinton era and the early Bush era. We now are getting these large margins from younger Americans repeatedly, structurally, regardless of who the candidate is. This is a big problem for the Republicans, and it's a huge opportunity for us because we should be making more of these voters. I mean, the core to my Get to 55 is that we've got to launch a national voter registration drive for young people to drive youth turnout through the roof in 2024. And I want to just make sure people are aware of this, right? From 1992 to 2004, we averaged 47% of the vote. And then I and others were involved in identifying millennials and Hispanics as being a new part of the electorate. And we leaned into that coalition in 2006 and 2008. And since we identified a way to expand our coalition, we've now been averaging 51% of the vote. We're a majority party now in the United States. And it is an amazing achievement. And part of what I'm arguing now is that we jump 4 points from that period to this last period, right? From 47 to 51. Now we need to go out and get 55. And I lay out in my memo some ideas about how to do that. This is why this is a big problem for Republicans, right? The percentage of the electorate that is Gen Z and millennial is increasing. And these are voters that are overwhelmingly with us. They do better with older voters. We do better with younger voters. We need younger voters to vote more in order to have the kind of politics that we want in the country. So despite our success, right, we're underperforming on the economy. I'm going to go through this really quick. This is a huge area of opportunity for us. This was the AP vote cast in the 2020 election. Trump beat Biden by 12 points in the basic question of who's better able to handle the economy. This is when we were in a recession and losing jobs, by the way. And on the people who voted on the economy as their number one issue here, you can see that Trump won those voters by 62 points, right? So Biden entered the presidency in a depressed state on economic issues. The way to think about it is he won COVID voters, which is how he got elected. But for voters who cared about the economy, the shutdown Democrat argument mattered to them. And, we saw this sort of underperformance in the economy show up throughout, it's been here for his whole presidency. This is just some snapshots into that in June of 2021 when the economy was booming. Again, you see huge Democratic advantages on COVID, on healthcare, barely any advantage on the economy here, right? So you can see these enormous differences that exist that started manifesting, where I call it the underperformance by Biden on the economy. And then, this is now from January of this year, you can see that Biden's approval rating in Navigator is -6, but his approval on the economy is -13. And so, this is a problem. This is something that, and what is important to recognize, and this is another piece. Oh, when people are informed about the economy, right, and all the stuff that I just showed you, we go from being down -5 here in this poll to being up 3, right? And this shows that in a what's called a ballot test, we are able to gain on the economy. People don't know the data that I've just shown you. We know from polling, when the question was asked, were more jobs created in 2021 versus 2020, only 20% of Americans knew that. And keep in mind that in 2021, we had more jobs created than any year in American history. And in 2020, jobs were lost, right? So people don't know this basic reality of what's happened to the American economy, which is why, despite all this success that we've had, people don't know it. And this creates, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity, right? If we have an extended conversation with the American people about the economic reality and this data that I've gone through, I think we can make enormous gains. And if we don't, we're not going to have the election that we want to have in 2024. You can't be losing on the economy and expect to win in an American election. It worked during COVID because there was something bigger than the economy. But generally, you don't want to be in negative territory in a presidential election on economic issues. So let me summarize all this today. So first of all, one of my lessons to all this is that we have to lean into what I call asymmetry. The left and right frame, the idea that there's a left and right and they're kind of equally virtuous and equally full of vice, is a Republican construct. It's a construct of the right, because what I just showed you is that the two parties are not the same. And any effort to make us feel the same or to argue that we are the same diminishes our accomplishments and diminishes their repeated failures. So first of all, we have to stick to this idea that it's not left and right, but good or not so good, right? Modern, reactionary, whatever the frame is. But this basic left-right frame is a problem for us, and we have to reject it. The second thing is that I do think that we are entering a period that was similar to the period coming out of World War II, where we've all suffered a collective trauma, and that the Democratic Party is being called again to defend freedom and democracy the way that we did all those years ago. We're in an extended period now where I think, we just went through a period of enormous peace where the American system was extended to the rest of the world. We're now in a period where there's going to be more conflict than there was over the last generation. And we have to understand this because we have to win. And I think that the Democratic Party, as we've watched Donald Trump, once again this week, kiss Putin's ass and kiss autocrats' ass, it's going to be us who are going to have to make sure that democracy and freedom prevail. We did it once before. We're going to have to do it again as a family. And I go back to this basic idea that in 1941, FDR gave what may be the most important political speech ever given in American English, where he laid out what the world should look like after World War II. And he envisioned a world based on freedom, 4 simple freedoms that are in the UN Charter that became the basis of the modern world that we know today. So simple, so powerful, so connected to this idea of openness and freedom, and not dominion and authority over others, right? But an open world. And this is the world that's really under threat today. And the reason that it matters is that this period since World War II has been a golden age for humanity. More people lived under democracies than any other time in human history. Life expectancies have gone through the roof during this period. We also know that the global, the extreme poverty rates have plummeted. People are better off today and have more freedom than they've ever had in human history. And there's no period that's even remotely anything like what we've seen. And what's critical to understand is that we did that. The Democratic Party did that. We imagined this world, a world that wasn't based on authority and dominion, but one on freedom. And that world that we built in the 1940s is now being challenged by this Russian and Chinese alliance. And it's something that we have to recognize that is something we're going to have to defend together. And so as we go forward as a party, I want us to do a better job at leaning into our extraordinary legacy. We have done so much good for so many people. It's my view that there's an argument to be made that the Democratic Party's done more good for the people of the world than any other organized political force in human history. I'm willing to have people challenge me on that, but I'm certainly putting that out there today for us to chew on. And, look at all the things that we've done together. I mean, we have been a remarkable force for progress and good in America and the world for 100 years now. And for me, I used to not have this slide because I just used to say, well, the Republicans during this recent period just haven't done their part. But I think we all know that's not sufficient anymore, any longer, that they've become something that reeks of malevolence, that's become dangerous. And this is not a secret anymore. I mean, when we first started talking about this, there really wasn't public language around the fear of MAGA and the scariness of MAGA. But now we know that MAGA has become a dangerous force in America. So we have one party that's done all this good, another party that's not done its part and has now become dangerous and radical. We have to create that contrast in the minds of the people. I think it's why we've done so well in the last 3 elections. People fundamentally understand this. We've been good enough and they're still too crazy. And watching DeSantis and Trump move forward, we know that that basic structure, that we've done good and they're still too crazy, is likely to be the politics in 2024 as well. So, you often hear people talk about, what's wrong with America, how I think carnage, American carnage, all this stuff. And I just want to remind everybody, right, that during this period, all the job growth that's happened in the United States has basically happened when we've been in power. And that the problems that we have in America, right, aren't about our politics or about Washington. It's the Republican Party that's become a problem. Right? One of our 2 political parties has not contributed to moving our country forward now over a very long period of time, and has now also descended into a dangerous degree of extremism and radicalism that is threatening our republic in a way that is still kind of astonishing to all of us. And so we have to reject this idea that, when people talk about the things that have gone wrong, we have to name it, right? It's the Republicans that have let the country down, not our politics, not Washington. There's not something structurally, fundamentally wrong with all of us. And I reject that, as you can see in this data. And if we have any doubt about who they become and what they are, let's just spend a few seconds here reminding ourselves about what's happened with the Republicans in recent years. Thanks, everybody. I'm really grateful for you being here today. Sorry again for the technical problems. I'm going to get those sorted out. I got to go to PowerPoint school, I guess, even though I've done about 8 million PowerPoints in my life. We at the Democratic Party, I just want to leave you with this final thought that we need to be loud and proud about the good that we've done. We need to help the American people understand more about their own history. We are part of among the most noble and consequential political projects in all of human history. And, we've been called before to defend freedom and democracy, and we're being called again. I look forward to being in the trenches with all of you. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. And please do join me on Substack. Let me open it up to questions both on YouTube and here on Zoom. And again, I want to thank everybody who tried to help me fix the deck earlier. We're just going to move on. And yeah, I know. Zoom issued an update. I look, today was just one of those days, right? Like my internet crapped out 5 minutes before we went on air. Who knows why, right? Like these things happen. We just got to roll with it and keep going. Let me get to a couple questions here there's a hand raised. Hey, Gail, let me bring you in here, Gail. You jumped in, so I'm going to ask you to unmute. You should be able to, Gail, you should be able to turn your mic on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, fire away, Gail.
How are we going to combat all the dark money that is being put into the current campaigns?
Yep, it's a great question. And some of you already know what I'm going to say about that. The way we counter it is because of all of you. And, our campaigns, our candidates raised 5-6 times more money than the Republican candidates raised last cycle. we beat them in the battlegrounds because of our grassroots and because of the passion and intensity of the people who are here today. You guys provided the money and the money and the resources that allowed us to be louder than they were, control the information environment in the battlegrounds. And our secret weapon now is all of you, is that we are now in a place where we have these muscular, huge campaigns. All of you who write postcards and do texting and phoning from wherever you are into battlegrounds. The Republicans have nothing like that. They have the dark money, the super PACs. If you could design a system, right, and choose between the way we've built our politics and the way they've built their politics, we've made a far better choice. It's far better to have muscular campaigns and millions of people contributing than having 100 people writing large checks. And so we shouldn't be scared of their dark money. They've made, I think, a historically set of bad choices about how to manage their politics. We've made far better choices in how we design our politics. But at the end of the day, that what I'm describing, Gail, is that at the end of the day, hold on, let me just do a technical thing here. Is that at the end of the day, I'd rather be us than them, and in every way. And so I think people have to recognize that the grassroots of the Democratic Party and our campaign apparatus is stronger today than it's ever been. It's why we outperformed expectations in 2022. It's why I think we're favored to win the presidency in 2024. And it's really an important part of my Hopium project is for us not to give them more power than they have, right? We're the strong party. They're the weak party. We're united. They're divided. We've had a great president. Joe Biden's been a good president. The country's better off. My God, you can't say that about them in any way, right? And so come with me in this journey and live in this place of strength and power and opportunity and growth. It's why my Get to 55 idea is something we can only do if we're strong, right? We're at 51. We need to get to 55. And, we'll talk about that. I'm hosting a political briefing next week live. You can all come. I'll be talking more about the political side of all this next week. Today, we're really more focused on this economic data. Let me take a question from YouTube. B. Johnson asked, are there any plans discussed to get to 55 in Midas Touch? I'll reach out to Ben and the gang and Jordy and the whole team there and see if they'll have me on. I just did a podcast with Marcos and Daily Coast this week where we discussed it. I did the broadcast radio show, which is also available. You can also go to my site, and there's a 4-minute video of me talking about Get to 55. And just very quickly, because it's come up now a couple of times, Get to 55 is about us going on offense. It's expanding our coalition. It's growing our vote. It's getting to 55%, as we just did in Wisconsin, by the way. And it's about having the ambition in this election where we just don't win by this little bit, but we win by a lot. And by winning by a lot and going big, because they have left in real estate, geographic and demographic real estate for us to go grab. If we win by a lot, I hope that we can break the back of MAGA and loosen its dark grip on the Republican Party. Winning by 55 would not just be good for us, but it'd be good for the Republican Party. It'd be good for the country because it could start to really finally fundamentally weaken MAGA. So if you go to Hopium Chronicles, go read up on Get to 55. There's also a 4-minute video of me, going in more depth into it. Play with the idea. Let's stay in touch about it. It's generated a lot of interest in folks. And I want to be clear, right? We got from 47 to 51 through strategy, right? It wasn't an accident. A meteor didn't hit the earth, right? This was something we intended to do. I was part of that effort back in the mid-aughts when we did this with Hispanics and millennials. Now we need to do it again and to jump another 4 points and get to 55. I think we can do it. And the fact that we just did it in Wisconsin was amazing. If you look at the Jacksonville mayor's race, a Republican-held seat in Jacksonville, May 16th, I'm hosting our great candidate, Donna Deegan, is coming on Monday at 1 o'clock. All of you should come meet her. The first poll, the big poll that just came out this week, she's at 54. There it is again, right? 55, 54. It's not 50, 51. We can go and grow but it requires strategy, intention. It's sort of man on the moon, right? I don't exactly know how we're going to get there, but we got to get there. And that's part of what I'm calling for in my get to 55. So Bart asks in the Q&A, we keep hearing that no one really knows or appreciates all the legislation the Biden administration's passed. What can our leader do to put this info out to the country? I think this is a great question. And Bart, thanks for asking. There's two ways to answer that question, right? One is that you're seeing Biden now. You saw it in the State of the Union. You're seeing him travel. He's in the middle of a 3-week period, or was until he went to Ireland, talking about his investment agenda. They're going to be spending most of his public time, in my view, this year, talking about these 3 big bills and the impact. Because as these things start rolling out, they're doing ribbon cuttings, the cabinet is out. And I think we can make significant strides. I think he can make significant strides by just continuing to stay focused on it. But what I want everyone here to do is to think about, what are you going to do to help tell this story? I'm providing all this information. It's on my website. You'll be able to watch the video today. I have economic analysis. I am going to, over the summer, I don't have time until June or July, start to make this stuff easier to and more accessible for more people. You know, a lot of my work historically has been sort of working with elites in Washington, and I'm now trying to make my stuff more accessible for regular folks. That's going to take a little while, and you need to be patient with me. I mean, I can't do everything all at once, and I'm still learning my way through this new journey that I'm on. But what I'll say to you, to everyone who's here today, is that my challenge to you is you need to get loud. If we all get louder, if 1 million, 2 million Democrats get louder, we work, we learn this information, we send it through our networks. You want to be loud but not annoying, as I always say, right, to your friends. If we, a couple million of us, I mean, the way I like to talk about this is that I worked in the war room 30 years ago. And the way we think of the war room is like 20 sweaty kids, you know, drinking Red Bulls, cranking out videos. We need to think of the war room now as 1 million, 2 million people getting up every day, amplifying the good works of the Democrats, and being loud. And I think if we do that together, if we all commit to that, I think we can close the gap with the Republicans, because they're louder than we are. They're not better than we are. They're not more, they don't have a better policy agenda than we do, but they're louder. And we've got to close the gap. We have an obligation to close the gap. And so I put it back to you, Bart. What are you going to do, right? And because you're not going to be alone in this. If 1 million of us or 2 million of us do this, we can be very, very loud. And it's more voices singing in the chorus, however, whatever your analogy is. And I think that part of my challenge to all of you is we need to become information warriors. We need to become far more intentional about showing up, not just in elections, as we've done very well in recent years, but this debate about the future of our country is happening every day. And all of us can be a little bit louder. And together, 1 million of us doing that can make an enormous difference. Let me just go to some other questions here. Hold on. Catherine has, I hear and see your job creation stats, but I see no evidence that this is the lived experience of these numbers. You know, I think this is a very important question. And I think that you have to recognize that, you know, there has been an enormous amount of garbage pumped into our daily discourse for a long time. And that we, in our work together, we're in part going to liberate people from the red wavy kind of disinformation and negative information that is, you know, sort of in our daily discourse by providing them real information, positive information, good information. And we're not fighting against people's lived experience, because there's a lot of data showing, Catherine, that I can show you that people believe that their lives are good, that their jobs are good, right? That they're content in their own lives. They're not angry and frustrated and ready to burn the country down. This set of questions, I think Democrats have to get to a more sophisticated place on this question of contentedness than we are. And I think that, you know, if things were so bad for so many people, how have we done so well in so many recent elections? And I think that it is, the data is clear. I want to be very clear about this. Almost everybody in America is better off today than they were 20 years ago. Almost everybody, right? Almost everybody. Certainly an overwhelming majority are. And the fact that people don't know that is something that is a problem for them understanding about the success of their own country. And this, to me, I sometimes talk about this as if the United States didn't know in 1946 that they had just won World War II. And so we have to reject this notion that there has been a decline in America. I just showed you a mountain of data, that the economic data I just showed you, things we may be better off today than we've ever been in the history of the country. And certainly we're better off than we were in the 1950s and 1960s, when women and people of color didn't have the kind of opportunities that they have today. By so many understandings, we are better off today than we've ever been. Why we don't know that is something that I think we have to change together collectively. I think this is how we defeat MAGA, is we don't allow their dark pessimism and their negative sentiment that they're pumping into our discourse every day to become our reality. We have to, as I wrote in my piece on Hopium, we cannot obey in advance. We cannot allow their language, their discourse, their negative sentiment to become ours, right? We have to liberate ourselves from it and live in a place where you are living in one of the most virtuous political experiments in human history, where this country has done remarkable amounts of good for so many people for so long. The economy is better. The deficits come down under Democrats, lowest uninsured rate, lowest poverty rate. All these things are objectively true. And the fact that people don't know them, know it, doesn't mean that that's on us, right? We have to tell this story better. And it's how we defeat MAGA. We have to respond to them talking down America by us talking it up. And as I talk to people who know me and have gotten to know me over the last year, part of the reason I stayed the course on the No Red Wave was that when I was giving my talks to grassroots groups all over the country, what I was hearing was love of country, passionate patriotism. I heard, I want people who wanted to believe that we could overcome MAGA and fight and win. And I think this idea that we are so much better than they represent, that they continue to let the country down, not only through their performance, but by the way they talk about the country itself, the carnage, the American carnage speech. I mean, Ann Applebaum, who is one of the most brilliant commentators in America today, if you don't follow her, she writes for The Atlantic, wrote a column right after the Republican convention, where she said Donald Trump's speech was amazing in 2016. She said, she lives in Eastern Europe. She knows the Russians and so on. She said, that speech was like, 25 minutes of Russian talking points about the United States. There was nothing that America had done that was virtuous. And I think that this is their strategy. Their strategy is to pump negative sentiment so that we feel less good about our democracy, less good about our country, less good about each other, about our institutions, our president, the whole American project. Well, we can't let them win because they're wrong. It's propaganda. It's not the actual lived experience of the people in this country. And as you saw, as I showed you again and again, the data shows that people understand that Democrats are better than Republicans. There are more Democrats than Republicans. We're not two sides of one coin, and we have to reject that structurally. So yes, great question. And but we can't let, our job is to not accept that false frame, but to fight it, is the way I fought the red wave, right? To not allow a false reality become the reality that is understood. We have to let the American people get in touch with their own history. And their history is, this is a remarkable country and we're all really lucky to be here. And we have to fight for our future and for the future of freedom and democracy here and all around the world. That's why we're here, everybody, right? That's why you're here today. Let me take one more. And I don't know if there's anything from YouTube, Judeline, and let me just take one more. Alan says, can't we get Paul Krugman to write more? He does write about this stuff a lot, actually. He's not exactly where I am, but he's not all that far off. I mean, I think that, he's closer to this. And then let me just end, because, Julia asked this and a few other people have asked this, and let me just close it to here, is there a way to get this presentation redone and available for us to post on places like our local Democratic Facebook page? Look, this presentation is available. I mean, it's on Hopium. You can share it now. You're going to be able to share this version. This is something that you can make available. I've also cut up pieces of it to do some of the sections and release those as well. I have a YouTube channel. Go check it out. There's a lot of visual material there that you can use to tell the story. And I apologize for the production challenges we had today, because it will, I'm not scheduled to do this for another month. I may have to do it again just to sort of with the updated data, because every month all the data is new, right? I go through and add, update everything every month. I do it once a month just for everyone who cares about this presentation. I do it live once a month and then release the recording that day. And I do it because the data's changed, and I want to keep people current on, what we've seen, and to have the latest arguments, but also because I use this as a way. It's like working out, right? Like I go back and I spend hours with the data, and it helps me orient myself and create arguments that I use. But I'll conclude with this, which is for any of you who've gotten to know my Hopium work, this deck is the origin of Hopium. My belief and hope and optimism and patriotism came from putting this deck together. And the original essay I wrote about this in the spring of 2017, about how I'm rejecting Trump's pessimism and that the country is better than he says. And the journey that I've been on, in the last year, in fighting the red wave, starting Hopium Chronicles, it really began with this work here. This is the foundational work of my recent career. And I'm so pleased to be able to share it with you. And yes, we have to get it to more people. And I'll work with you on that. Coming this summer, there's going to be, Simon will be able to be, I've got a call coming in. Simon is going to be able to simplify some of this stuff, but I need a few more months to get there.